We, as the Greens, campaigned strongly for a change of government, and it couldn't come soon enough. The previous government turbocharged the climate crisis and made inequality worse. The Greens are a big part of the reason that we have seen a change of government, with Greens preferences critical to unseating many Liberal members of Parliament across the country, and also seeing the welcome election of a number of independents in a number of seats as well, who have helped change the political culture in this country for the better. We look forward to working with the new government. We'll wait until the results come in and see what the ultimate makeup of the Parliament is. But we want to work with the next government to tackle the climate crisis and to tackle the inequality crisis. So we look forward to having any discussions that need to be had over the coming weeks. And of course, it may well be that when all the votes are counted, that Labor is able to get to a majority. So we're just going to have to wait and see what the result is across the rest of the country. But one thing is for sure, this was a Green slide. More people turn to the Greens than ever before, and I am so delighted that there will be so many new Greens MPs from Queensland representing this state and the people of this state in Parliament. And I'd like to now give them all an opportunity to introduce themselves, and you may have some questions for them as well, and also to give you a bit of an update about the count for Brisbane.
Yeah.
I am so excited that Queenslanders have chosen to send a regional teacher from Gladstone to the Senate. The reason that we have won this Senate seat is because people right across Queensland, whether they live in the city or the country, want the same thing. They want affordable housing. They want dental into Medicare. They want our public schools to be properly funded, and they want free university and TAFE. And they also want a just transition to 100% renewable energy. I am so proud to be representing the people of Queensland right across our state, and I will be fighting for all of those things down in Canberra. I'm actually not surprised. We've been campaigning for over 12 months right around the state, and everywhere we've gone, people have told us they can't find a house to rent, they can't afford a home to rent, they can't afford to buy. People have told us that they can't get the dental treatment that they need. It doesn't matter where they live, people are experiencing the same thing. I live in a coal and gas community. People in central Queensland want a just transition to a renewable energy economy, and we are the only party with a plan to do that. So I am not surprised. I'm incredibly proud and excited, but I'm not surprised.
Your win gives the Greens a presence in central Queensland. How important is that for the party going forward?
Look, I think it's not just important for the party, I actually think it's important for the country. We know that we need to transition to renewable energy, and we need to do it fast. And the way that we do that is that we bring regional communities along with us, and I'm really excited to have the opportunity to do that work.
A lot of those people are relying on coal for their jobs, so how do you weigh that up? That's a confusing message, isn't it?
No, I think it's not confusing at all. I stood on pre-poll last week in Gladstone, and I spoke to a family where one of the members of the family works in that industry, and they said to me, because I have a young child as well, we know we need to transition, we just want to know what the plan is. We have a plan. We have a plan to look after coal workers for the next decade. We have plans to kickstart the renewable energy green manufacturing economy. We have a plan to give kids in the school, in the place I live, an opportunity for a really exciting future.
This is the vindication of a years-long strategy of community building and rewriting the rules of Australian politics. We in Griffith knocked on over 90,000 doors, had tens of thousands of conversations. But not only that, we embedded in these communities now for years, well over 6 years. When the floods hit, we helped people clean up hundreds of houses across the electorate. When the Omicron crisis hit and people were stuck at their homes isolating, we helped drop off free boxes of food. This wasn't just a campaign that was fought over the last 6 weeks. This is a campaign recognising that people are fed up with politics. If there's one message out of this election, It's that people feel completely disconnected from the major parties, no longer represented. And we went to people's doors and talked about dental and mental health into Medicare, building public and affordable housing, tackling the climate crisis, bringing back free uni and TAFE. But the fundamental message was this: in a wealthy country like Australia, everyone should have what they need to live a good life. We can afford it, along with a safe climate. And I couldn't be prouder of the team and the people that we talked to over the last 14 months of this campaign. The number of people I spoke to who were voting Greens for the first time, and I would just like to say to the people of Griffith, thank you for your trust. I will endeavour not to let you down. What we have done over the last 14 months is just a preview of what I hope we're going to be able to build in this electorate. We don't just want to build an electorate office and a political representative. We want to build a community movement that means no matter what's going on in your life, however you're struggling, we're going to be there helping to work with you to build a community that means when you move into Griffith, you know that we've got your back. And I'm really looking forward to the next 3 years.
I'm so very proud and excited about the prospects we have in Ryan to actually represent the people. Certainly in our long campaign too, where we've been talking to thousands and thousands of people across the electorate of Ryan, which is huge, we have been taking the temperature of the electorate, and the voters have spoken. They want proper representation. They want a representative of their community. They want real action on climate change. They want a government to actually act on affordable housing, on getting healthcare, dental and mental health into Medicare. They have spoken, and they feel as though they've been disenfranchised and abandoned by previous governments. So we are very proud to have actually taken this seat that has been a long-term Conservative seat for basically its whole existence. And it is a really, really interesting representation that the tectonic plates are shifting in politics in Australia. And I think we're here at the beginning of real change in Australia, and we are here to deliver that. Thank you.
So when you look at the age group, I know some of the people we interviewed were over 60, 70 wanting climate change, and then the young groups as well, high number of renters. What were you getting out there? What were they telling you? You know, people who had always voted for the
Many people came up to me at pre-poll and said to me, Elizabeth, I am going to vote for you this time. I have been a long-term Liberal voter and I feel completely abandoned. People had different issues around this. One person had a child who was gender transition, and said that they had been a Liberal voter all their lives, but the cruelty that that party was representing was a real challenge in their lives. So that was their reason. Another woman came up to me and said, I am voting for you. I've voted for the Liberals for 25 years. I cannot bear Scott Morrison and what that government represents. And they saw that our local member in the area was, like a representation of those values, and they want that changed.
Liz,
so, yeah.
Sorry, Liz. With the Teals, there were none in Queensland. How much do you think the Greens benefited in Queensland from there being no Teals?
I think we represent what the Teals represent, but a lot more. So the Teals are representing things like, yes, action on climate change, better treatment of women, a federal ICAC with teeth, but we have far more policies that actually spoke to the real needs of the people in our electorate. As I said, about affordable housing, about healthcare, so many other social issues, real immediate action on climate change with a plan to do it, which was really critical to people, to do that in the next 8 years, not the next 28 years.
And
so,
the women issue, we know Gillian Simmons brutally stabbed Jane Prentice, really, and then we're hearing a lot of the women's issue, well-educated women in Ryan who just couldn't tolerate the LNP's treatment of women. What message did you get there?
That was actually a huge message that we got. There's a lot of residual bitterness about that, particularly in the population of women, and I think for them to actually be looking forward to a woman representing them is incredibly important. And yes, certainly a lot of people raised that issue with me, and in a way the member that we have just dislodged was like a representation of that really toxic culture within that party. The way he got into the seat, and also how he's been voting over time, is really, really influential on people's decision to oust that party and that particular individual member as well. So that's been good.
How do you think your group will pass in the House?
Well, we need to discuss that as a group, and we need to understand what the kind of construction of the new government is going to be. before we can actually work out how to operate within the Parliament. But yeah, we will be a force for change. We will be pushing for all of the things that these amazing voters have voted us in for.
Can we get your response to that question about, obviously, the absence of Teal candidates in Queensland? That benefited the Greens, didn't it?
Very happy to. Can I just ask Stephen to speak first, and I'm happy to come and answer those questions.
It's very clear to me that the people of Brisbane and across southeast Queensland and across the country voted for change overnight. They're sick of the status quo. People in Brisbane were sick of the status quo, and we saw that with massive swings against the incumbent in this seat. Yeah, Brisbane has always been this microcosm of progressivism, and I'm so proud that we've been able to run this incredible campaign, talking to thousands of people at the doors, at markets, over the phones, being able to present people with an alternative, a change, and a plan. And that is why we've seen our vote grow so much in this seat. You know, people were sick of the status quo. They were sick of a member that was invisible. They were sick of nothing happening and nothing changing over the last 9 years. And that's why we've seen our vote increase. We've been out there giving people an alternative, telling them that you don't have to accept politics as usual, that it doesn't have to be this way, that we can hope for change and we can hope for a better country. So I am cautiously optimistic as the count continues and goes forward. We're still with our nose out in front. But what I promise to the people of Brisbane, if I'm so fortunate to be your representative, that I will be unbought, loud, unashamedly progressive, and I will fight for the values of our community no matter what.
It's still close to a seat though, isn't it?
It is, yeah. We still are a nose in front, even as the postals are getting counted and as pre-poll is coming in, we're still out in front. So I am, yeah, fingers crossed, cautiously optimistic that we're gonna pull through.
How much do you think the flight paths play into what the sort of voters want?
I've been working with the Brisbane Flight Path Community Alliance for well over 9 or 10 months at this point. I think it's a symptom of a broader issue. So the issue of corruption and politicians and parties being bought by giant corporations who then in turn, parties then in turn write legislation that benefits them. So I think what's really worked well for us as the Greens is that we don't take any of that corporate money, and so people see us as a force for good and a force for positive change because we're not beholden to those vested interests.
Okay, your background in Queensland. How will that affect your decision making?
I think it's actually given me a really, really good grounding for this campaign. The fact that my normal job is talking to people, is making connections and just being myself. You know, I represent 29 gay retail worker. That is quite a large majority of this electorate as well. So I think it's important that the Parliament reflects what the people of the community are like. So I think it puts me in a unique position where I have the lived experience of the last 10 years, the last 20 years of government inaction on climate change, rental affordability, the housing crisis. I know what that's like because I live it every single day, like so many other people do in our community. So I think it gives me a really unique perspective, if we are fortunate enough to win this seat, to get in there, hit the ground running and say, I know what this is like, I live it every single day, and that's where my passion comes from to fight to change it.
Is there a flavorful sort of majority? What specific
Look, we really are going to have to wait and see what the ultimate count is. So many people voted early, a lot of people voted in postal votes, and there's a lot of seats where it'll come down to the final count about who finishes in front of who and then whose preferences go to who, all of which may be decided by a handful of votes. So we're going to have to wait and see, and the Australian Electoral Commission is telling us that they're counting as quickly as they can, but it may be some days before we know the final result. We've been very clear about what approach we would take if there is a minority parliament. We want to work with the new government. We want stable, effective and progressive government. That would be our priority. We're willing to talk. We've been very clear we need action on the climate crisis and on the inequality crisis. We put forward a comprehensive platform, including a number of measures that we think could be taken up by the new government, and we'd like to see them taken up. But look, so all of that remains on the table, and we're willing to talk. I think we do now need to wait and see what the final result is.
You've got a massive result in Queensland here. It's a resource state, and you're going to have at least some sort of negotiating power with the Albanese government. Can you take us through how you think you may exercise that power, particularly when you've made pledges that you want to stop any new coal or gas project?
Before I came into this job in Parliament, I represented workers in coal-fired power stations, helped them to defend their wages and conditions after they were attacked by waves of privatisation in Victoria. My position and the position that we've taken this election has been crystal clear. We need to tackle the climate crisis, but we need to do it in a way that supports coal and gas workers and communities through the transition. And so this election campaign has spent a fair bit of time with Penny Ormond-Kane in regional Queensland, but also in regional New South Wales, going to coal towns, going to the gas towns, with a simple message. We're all in this together. We have to tackle the climate crisis, but we have to do it in a way that looks after communities during the transition. And so we laid out a comprehensive plan that says we've got to make sure that coal workers don't lose money and have secure jobs as we make the transition, and that there are good, well-paying jobs and industries in these communities as we make the transition. Now, for many, as far as Queensland is concerned, in many places around this state, the best job for a coal miner will be another mining job. There's real opportunities for this country in the minerals and metals that are going to be needed to power the world in a zero carbon economy. This country's got the second largest deposits of vanadium, a mineral that's going to be used in batteries that are attached to electricity systems around the country. Let's look at how we can mine and process products here in a way that's going to sustain jobs. Let's look at how we bring back manufacturing with cheap, clean energy. All of this has been part of our comprehensive plan, and we went to regional communities. We had those discussions. We said, yes, we do need to understand that coal and gas are the main causes of the climate crisis, and we need to transition, but we're all in this together. And the message back from coal and gas workers was, at least someone is having an honest discussion with us about it. And for so many years, they have been lied to by politicians from Liberal, Labor and the others who all come and say we can keep opening up new coal mines and still meet our climate targets, when people know that is just not right.
What if an application goes to the Albanese government for a coal or gas project? What would your message be to Mr Albanese now?
Look, we've put our position on the table. We need a plan to get out of coal and gas, and we back the call from the International Energy Agency, from the world scientists, from the United Nations Secretary General, who have all said that to meet net zero targets, there can be no new coal and gas infrastructure from now on. That's just the science. That is what the rest of the world is saying, and that's the message that we'll take to whatever parliament the people decide. And if I could just come back to that Teal question that was asked. Yeah, let's come back to that question. I welcome the fact that there will be more Teal independents in the next parliament. They ran great campaigns and managed to elevate climate on the agenda this election, including in their electorates. But I think the Greens' approach to this election deserves to be assessed on its own merits. I mean, well before a number of those Teal candidates even announced that they were running, we laid out our plan and our priority seats and what our approach would be this election. And all through Parliament, during the last term of Parliament, we said very clearly there's better ways of spending money in this country than giving handouts to Clive Palmer. Let's use it to get dental into Medicare instead. We identified the seats that we would focus on, and there was really only one seat around the country that ended up being a competition between Greens and Teals. In the sense that's the seat of Kooyong, that was previously a Greens Liberal seat, and the independents campaigned in that strongly, and congratulate the independents for winning there. But aside from that, we were actually running separate races, and we put our plan on the table, and we were campaigning in plain sight. We laid that out and we were campaigning with those objectives for a number of years, and we see the results now. So I think our plan, I congratulate the Teals, but I think our approach and our alternative, not only strong climate policies, but our alternative economic policies and our ways of tackling cost of living deserves to be assessed on its own merits.
Are you claiming Brisbane, even though it's 600 votes at the moment? Or?
No, not yet. We're watching it very closely. We've got our noses in front, and as Stephen said, cautiously optimistic. But no, not at the moment. We're going to wait and see as the votes come in over coming days.
Do you have concerns that if you go to minority government, that the government might walk around the Greens and start looking to
Look, that's ultimately going to be up to Labor as to what they want to do. Our approach is that we're willing to work cooperatively. Stable, effective and progressive government is important, but stability is important. And the Greens will be a very big presence in the Senate. The Greens will be a very big presence in the Senate. We'll be in balance of power in the Senate, potentially in our own right. Whenever the Liberals oppose anything, things won't get through the Senate without the Greens' support. So we will have a big presence now in both houses of Parliament, something that puts us in a very strong position in the next Parliament. And I think people don't want to see another election, people don't want to see instability. And after we know what the final outcome is, I would hope that the next government also wants to prioritise stability so that people know what the next 3 years will look like. We're willing to talk, but again, let's wait and see what the final outcome is.
Do you support Anthony Albanese with his approach to the voice to Parliament? And how successful do you think it can be if they don't get support from the Liberals and Nationals?
If they don't get support
from the Liberals and Nationals?
Look, the Greens were the first party to back the Uluru Statement from the heart. We want to see progress on all elements of it, and that's voice, but it's also truth and treaty, and that has been a key part of our election campaign. Again, this is a very good example of where we're prepared and looking forward to working with the next government, because I think part of the reason that we wanted to see a change of government is that the previous government has been terrible for First Nations people, and there's been a lack of progress on those elements. We feel optimistic that we can see progress, including on those areas that are important to us around truth and treaty, and we're willing to work with and talk with the next government to ensure we see progress on all of those elements during the course of this Parliament. As to what happens if the Liberals oppose it, I mean, that's ultimately going to be a question for the government as to how they want to proceed, but our approach is that we want to work with the government to see progress on all three elements.
And is Labor going to have to sharpen its pencil with its net 2030 target?
Look, the causes of the climate crisis are coal and gas, and that is what is fueling the floods that we've seen. It's part of the reason we've had 3 years of fires and droughts and floods, and we can't make the problem worse. You can't put the fire out while pouring petrol on it. And we said very clearly that we want to see action on climate, but we've got to stop opening up new coal and gas projects and making the problem worse. And we need a plan to get out the coal and gas that looks after the communities. So that, for us, is something we'll be pushing in the next Parliament, whatever the shape of it.
Last question, guys. Back to that original question about the Teals. Obviously, there was an absence in Queensland of Teal candidates. The Greens have benefited from that clearly in some areas.
Well, you can look at it the other way around. I mean, before a number of the Teal candidates even announced it, we said, here's where we're campaigning hard. We said we're going to be campaigning hard in Brisbane, Ryan and Griffith, and we laid that out, and we said that those were on the list of our priority seats, and look, others may well have crafted their electoral strategies around that, I don't know. But our campaign, we were out there very clearly for a period of time saying this is the alternative that we're offering, and people have responded.
So you're saying you're scared them off? Put her up, guys.
Can I just ask locally, for the new candidates, Max, yourself, what changes would you like to see around Brisbane? What do you think is capable of being the first term?
Look, I think there's a bunch of changes. One of the overwhelming pieces of feedback we've got from people across Griffith was that no one's against development, but what they're frustrated about is developers are not paying their fair share in public infrastructure, whether that be local public parkland, public transport, and other key local infrastructure. The other big one is affordable housing. The number of renters that I spoke to who were being priced out of their areas. I mean, if I was born today, there's no way my parents would have been able to afford to rent the share house they had in West End. And I think the other big thing for us is flight noise. And this is going to be a big issue and growing over the next few months, 12 months, as international flights return. And So I think for some people it might sound like a trivial issue, but if you're exposed to over 80, 85 decibels worth of noise frequently at night, sometimes at 2:30 a.m., we know from studies around the world this has a massive detrimental effect on people's health. And all we're asking for on that is what Sydney Airport already has. And we know Sydney Airport, the noise mitigation procedures won there were won by a big people-powered movement. And whether it's local development, whether it's affordable housing and tackling the rental crisis in our local area, or whether it's tackling flight noise, our goal over the next 3 years is to do what's been done in the past, which is build big people-powered campaigns and apply pressure on Parliament from the streets and via local protest, as well as in Parliament itself.
And just on housing, how will you bring rental and housing costs down? Do you expect house prices to drop?
Well, it's hard to say, but what we do know is that rents and house prices continue to go up in Brisbane. I think we're in the lead up to another council and state election as well over the next 2 to 3 years, and I certainly plan to be applying a lot of pressure with my colleagues in state and local government to be putting massive community pressure on them to act on capping rent increases, making sure there's a vacancy levy to ensure that any of those vacant properties out there are rented out to renters or sold to first home buyers. There's actually a lot of things we can do, and I think it starts with organising people in the community. There's a lot of renters out there who feel incredibly powerless at the moment and feel like there's nothing they can do to tackle what are the massive national forces flowing over them and really badly interrupting their lives. But what we do know is in the past, these things have been won not just in Parliament, but when people get together and organise on behalf of their own interests. And there are so many people in Griffith right now waiting to work together as a community to not only put pressure on the federal government, but put pressure on the local and state government as well to finally take that action on this crisis. We know that something has to give right now, because the number of people whose lives are being destroyed right now because neither major party has any substantial plan around housing affordability from a local all the way up to a federal level is such a serious issue, and I'm looking forward to working with the community to fight back.
Can I just ask Max, what have you been doing for the past few years? You've been working behind the scenes, just in a nutshell, people who don't know you, what you've been doing.
Sure. My job in the Greens for the last few years is I was the state strategist for the 2017 and 2020 state election. That involved a few things, crafting the strategy for the party in those two elections, as well as drafting the state election platforms for the 2017 and 2020 state election.
And what is it? What are a couple of things you'd like people to know about yourself and what you bring to the role?
I suppose maybe just a bloody hard worker. I've spent the last 14 months knocking on doors almost every day. In fact, I think I've personally knocked on about 15,000 doors. My background is a role as an organiser. I work for the National Tertiary Education Union, working with casual and contract workers. What I love, to be honest, the thing I enjoy the most is working in the local community and helping build local community campaigns and crafting strategies around that. And really, I see my role more as a community organiser in some ways, and working with the my constituents and residents in Griffith to build big local community campaigns and apply pressure on Parliament, regardless of whether or not we're in the balance of power.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.